And before I bring up our speakers, I just want to get from a show of hands, who flew in from a very far distance? Just a show of hands. So who's local here to Paris? Show of hands. Okay, great, great. So we're going to have a debate. And it's about KYC, know your customer. And is KYC becoming the norm? And if yes, how? And I'm really excited to introduce our next speakers. We have Elizaveta Palaznik. And Elizaveta is an independent consultant. Hello, hello, hello. We want to get the intro. She's an independent consultant and in markets and crypto assets regulation. We have Asim Ahmad, founding partner with Eterna Capital. Welcome, Asim. We have Dr. Marwan Alzarouni, strategic advisor of the Dubai Department of Economy and Tourism. And we have our wonderful moderator, Andrew Rummer, previously with The Block. Enjoy.
Hello, hello. Hello, everyone. Hello, hello. Hang on, I've got too many things in my hands. Nice smooth start. Okay, welcome to the panel. I'm very excited to be here. This is an awesome room. I've never done a panel in an art gallery before, but it's pretty cool. We get a better view than you guys, really, because it's amazing. So yeah, to kick things off, maybe everyone could just introduce themselves, a minute or so, just to understand your background, your expertise, and I have an icebreaker question for all of you that you can hopefully tack on the end of your introduction, which is anonymity a fundamental human right? Just to kick things off with something hardcore. So Asim, come on, take us off. You introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Asim. I've been in the investment industry since 2010, mainly in traditional finance, moved into crypto 2016, launched Eterna Capital, a blockchain-focused VC in 2018. So for the last 5 years, we've been actively investing.
And is it a fundamental human right to be anonymous?
Yes, but if someone misuses it, then there should be a way to expose it.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Dr. Marwan.
Hello, I'm Dr. Marwan Alzarouni. Thank you for coming to the session. I know this is stage number 2, so I appreciate every single one of you. I'm a CEO of Dubai Blockchain Center, but more recently I'm an advisor for the Dubai government, more specifically Dubai Economy and Tourism Department, on everything to do with investment, with really pushing the envelope when it comes to use of technology within the tourism industry, as well as the economic outlook for Dubai for the next 10 years. So it is a really exciting kind of position to have, and it's also very worldwide focus rather than Dubai inward focus. And with that, I think we have 10 different themes, and one of them is technology adoption, but we have things like sustainable manufacturing, precision medicine. So if any of you has any project that they think that is trend-setting or really breaking all the rules and has nowhere else to go in the world when it comes to regulation, and it's a very innovative kind of project, very forward-looking, please look out for me and reach out.
And is anonymity a fundamental human right in your book?
I think it has to come with a balance. So I think with any kind of free-for-all kind of technology, it's havoc. We have to strike a balance between things that are making our lives easier versus chaos. So between order and chaos, anonymity lies somewhere in that slider. And when we position it perfectly, this is where we get the most benefit.
Elizaveta.
Hi everyone, I'm Elizaveta Palaznik. I'm an economist by background, and to this day I help law firm, consulting firms, and also crypto asset service provider navigate through the new European crypto regime, which is called MiCA, Market in Crypto Asset, as an independent consultant. And since I'm a big fan of education, and in our industry, education is very important, according to me. Whenever I have the opportunity, I do podcasts, university lecturing, business training, and speaking events like this one.
Fundamental human right to be anonymous?
Well, I think it's a very complex question. I will try to make it simple. So according to me, it depends on few aspects, few contexts within each country. It depends on the legal context, cultural, societal as well. So for instance, in the US, they value a lot freedom of speech. If you go to Germany, they value a lot privacy. If you go to China, they don't value that much anonymity, you know. So I think you have pros and cons. For people who are pros, who want anonymity, they will say it's better for privacy, for freedom of expression, etc. For people who are cons, they're against it, they will say that it might facilitate some illicit activities as well. So it's really depending on those three contexts, I would say.
So thanks for all the intros. This is a panel on KYC, or Know Your Customer, at a crypto conference. So I'm gonna guess most people here know what on earth KYC is, but just so we're all on the same page, I'm gonna ask Asim to give us a brief definition of what even is KYC.
Okay, so KYC are the checks that a business needs to do before it engages with a client to ensure that the services they are offering are suitable for the client, and also that the client is also suitable for them as well. So from a business perspective, you need to ensure if you're selling a complex product, that the client has the right education, the right advice to be able to make a decision to come in. I can say that from like the investment side and some of the products I've worked with in the past. And then also from the business side, dealing with a customer, you need to make sure that they're not involved in fraudulent activities. You know, you understand the source of funds. Otherwise, you could end up being, you know, a party helping them loan their money without knowing it. Generally speaking, KYC is usually a regulatory requirement. There's certain aspects of it as well. When you do KYC as a company, you know, you could possibly outsource it to somebody else, but you're ultimately responsible yourself. And there's elements of it where I think within Web3 we need to look at where, you know, there could be ways to solve for it. For the current issues, but KYC generally has a requirement on institutions to store the information on their clients as well. And you know, we can go a bit more into detail on that a bit later, I guess.
That's a nice simple definition to get us started. That's great. So this is a blockchain conference, a crypto conference. Crypto, blockchain, it's all about new technology. It's all about solving problems, about bringing solutions to space where difficulties currently exist. So in this KYC space, what are the difficulties with the current setup? Like, what are the problems to be solved, Marwan?
So as you know, Bitcoin, which was one of the first cryptocurrencies, it was pseudo-anonymous. A lot of the cryptocurrencies that came out, including programmable money, including smart contracts, they all depend on pseudo-anonymity. You know the wallet address, but you don't know who's behind it. But there are also rails for getting in and out of cryptocurrencies, including not limited to virtual asset businesses, including exchanges, including OTCs, where you are actually bridging the two worlds, the pseudo-anonymous world with wallets, as well as the real world with banking and also cashing out with the physical fiat cash. So that requirements, or those requirements from these institutions, initially when crypto was launching, did not require anybody to have any kind of KYC requirement, but with the regulations coming in and more governments and the regulatory bodies really dictating the same or similar kind of requirements from financial institutions on the crypto world, this kind of change is happening, but it's happening at a slower pace than we anticipated. Of course, with the earlier cryptocurrency related VASPs, we call them, it was a harder challenge and it took them longer to really onboard everybody that was previously onboarding into giving out information about themselves. Of course, the culture of crypto people is actually completely different, that they value their anonymity, and that's why we started with that question of anonymity. So it depends on the region, it depends on the culture, it depends on a lot of other things, and that slider we need to figure out perfectly, which we're still trying to pinpoint where it should be in regards to crypto.
I want to follow up on that point about some people in crypto valuing their anonymity. I'm sure everyone here on Twitter or other social media will follow accounts. They're anonymous, they're Twitter anons, they might have hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of followers, and we don't really know who they are. You might have a hunch. Is there a space in this world, like if we move to more KYC checks in crypto, will those people be able to operate in that same way?
I think we'll have two economies, the normal, regulated economy, and then we have the non-regulated space. I think with any kind of technology, there is always this gap in time and gap in regulation as well. So the regulations will catch up. Eventually, a lot of the space will be regulated because you're dealing with money, and with money comes incentives to do illicit activities. And illicit activities have been very good at adopting new technologies very quickly because that's the business need that they have. So it will be always a cat and mouse game.
Cool. I'm going to come to this side. Elizaveta. So Elizaveta is an expert on MiCA, as she said. I mean, for me, all of this space just wouldn't exist if it weren't for regulators. I mean, to be honest, I think lots of business would be happy to operate without knowing who their customers are, but it's forced on them by regulators and by regulation like MiCA that's coming in. So what can we expect to see changing? I mean, MiCA is in the process of being adopted in the European Union. What's going to happen for businesses that operate in the EU?
So yes, MiCA is a very hot topic these days. Just to know a bit the level of the audience, how many of you knows what MiCA covers in terms of regulation? Okay, so we'll try to not make it too complex. So I will have a step back a bit to explain what is MiCA, what it brings, and then how it interacts also with other regulations. So for those who don't know MiCA is basically the MiFID in the traditional finance industry, but for the non-traditional, as I call it, non-traditional financial sector. It covers, so it will basically cover, it will be for crypto asset issuers, stablecoin, and also other utility tokens, and also for, like we call it, not VASP anymore, but CAS, which are crypto asset service provider. So they will be able to provide some information in terms of, then you will need to disclose some information, capital requirements, some other, you have so many of them, I will not go deep in that, but this is what MiCA is. And why it's a hot topic to this day, it's because last week it was published in the European journal, which is a big thing because it means that it will enter into force this month, and it will enter to application within 12 and 18 months, depending if you are a token issuer or if you are a service provider. So this is why it's a big deal to this day. It's there since 2020 on the draft, and it took 3 years to get at this point of today. So what does it bring? So we need to know that in the world, it is the first comprehensive and harmonized legal framework for crypto. So it means that when it's entering into force, it's a regulation, not a directive. So it will enter into force the same way through all European member states, the same way at the same time. And it will also, one important thing, is it will allow passporting, which means if you apply for license in France, in Belgium, in Luxembourg, you will be able to offer your services through the whole European Union. So for those service providers and token issuers, I think it's a very interesting way to do business if they want to target European Union, of course. If you are outside of the European Union, if you still want to target Europe, you still need to comply with it. So it's not only for European companies. You can be a US or a company from Dubai if you want to target. Or Britain, exactly, or Switzerland. If you want to target a European customer, you will need to comply with MiCA. And it also addresses not only those token issuers or those service providers. It also addresses market abuse and market integrity. So you have different aspects of MiCA, which is quite interesting. Secondly, also it provide a new way for those token issuers and crypto service providers to notify or ask for authorization to the national competent authority, which is, I think, a big deal also, because now you will need to ask your competent authority if you can proceed, basically. So this is another thing. And the last thing, I think one of the most important here for our topic on KYC is the transfer of fund rule, which actually was published at the same time that MiCA was published last week. What transfer of fund rule means for all of us, if you're in the crypto space, it means that for any transaction that you and I are making with a crypto asset service provider, this service provider will need to take your information. You will need to provide them KYC with the amount of money you transfer, for instance. If you interact with Binance, Binance will have to take your KYC information with also the amount of money that you transact for any amount above 1,000 euros. So it's if it's below, it's okay. And this is the case when two crypto asset service providers are interacting with each other, or self-hosted wallet with a crypto asset service provider. For example, if you have a MetaMask account, if you interact with Binance or Crypto.com, those entities will need to have your KYC information. So the consequences of that is actually very big, because if you are a small crypto asset service provider, how you will be collecting this information, how you will be storing them, how will you protect them? So this is why we have the next question as well. So I think it changes everything, not only in Europe, but like I say, because of this regulation, it's also changing things worldwide, because you will need to comply with Europe, even though you are outside of it.
So yeah, talking about worldwide, I want to move a bit further east. I'd like to get Dr. Marwan's take on the regulatory scene in the UAE and how that's going to affect these companies in this space.
Thank you for that. So in the UAE, we have the world's first independent regulator for virtual assets called VARA, which is Virtual Asset Regulatory Authority, and you can visit their website at vara.ae. AE stands for Arab Emirates, it's short for United Arab Emirates. So, and they have the regulations listed there very clearly, very transparently. We have everything covered, the grounds level or the very fundamentals, not based on traditional financial regulations, but regulations that were created specifically for virtual assets, more specifically crypto assets. So that has been launched last year, but the actual regulations came into effect in February this year. And it's in line with MiCA and other worldwide kind of regulations. It is designed to be transportable or passportable as well. And therefore, it takes into consideration MiCA and also Far East regulations, more specifically in Hong Kong and Singapore. So we're in continuous conversation with the different regions just to make sure that any kind of regulation or any kind of directives that come out are in line with how the world is moving forward with these types of assets. Because, like I said, it is a new kind of regulation forefront and challenge. And nobody knows the perfect formula, but at least we can try this and then build on it and change it accordingly.
So if I have to sum up the tension here in this whole KYC space, on one side you've got regulators that understandably want to know where funds might be moving. They want to track potentially illicit funds. They want to stop things like money laundering. And on the other hand, you've got everyday users a lot of whom want their privacy respected and want their anonymity respected. So there's a kind of inherent tension between those two horses pulling in different directions. Is there a technological solution that can come along and help resolve that tension? And one phrase that comes up a lot in this space is zero knowledge proofs. is there anything else, zero knowledge proofs or other technology that can help resolve this tension, Asim?
Yeah, so I guess, we've got people who can talk about regulation, and I'm, I guess, one voice from the Web3 ecosystem and how it's seen. Sometimes when you read regulation, it feels like if something is anonymous, it's illegal, like you're doing something wrong, because it's there to protect in that 1 or 0.001% of cases where such a thing can happen, and the regulator just can't allow it. So, how do you find the right balance? Because if you think about people who value their anonymity, it doesn't mean that they are doing uncompliant things. And it's not mutually exclusive that someone who values, being anonymous can't also be compliant at the exact same time. But how do you find that balance with technology? And I guess that's what we're trying to see if there's a solution. I think it's, when you talk about zero knowledge proof, there's various ways of applying it. And if you apply it to basically make transactions completely private like Monero, then we already know that's a problem. But there are aspects within zero knowledge proof where you can apply it to different levels, perhaps somewhere where you expose enough information on KYC to ensure that regulators are happy that, you can, with pure mathematical certainty, prove that this person meets the criteria needed. So I think there is potential there. I think the area where there needs to be some work is around the storing of that information, which is currently a regulatory requirement. It's if you store it yourself or if somebody else stores it for you, it's for you. You have outsourced it, but it's still your responsibility. So how do you handle that around, with soul-bound tokens? Can you really hand over that responsibility to a soul-bound token to say, okay, you did it, and if it's wrong, it's your responsibility, and you have no control about the quality of what you've done there. So I think there's still some way to go in terms of understanding how zero knowledge can be applied within KYC, but there's definitely potential there. And like Dr. Marwan said, that you've got the space. One point I would make is I value my anonymity. I like to do things anonymously in Web3, but I also have a Kraken account. So where I'm forced to share KYC, I will do it. And it's not just in Web3 space where we're talking Kraken, I'm talking Amazon or anything else. You share your details, right? So where we have to, we do it. And I think there's going to need to be a balance there, especially if you think about how things generally work in Europe. And zero knowledge could be a way of, solving some of it, but there's still plenty of work to do. And on the point I was going to make about what Dr. Marwan said, there's going to be an ecosystem of compliant products and then the non-compliant stuff. And when you have those compliant products, then the big institutions can really participate in the space. You can't be in a liquidity pool where there could be blacklisted assets in there. If you're a BlackRock or another asset manager, you just cannot participate in that. But if you've got a pool where people are compliant, possibly anonymous, but that anonymity can be, they can be revealed if they do something wrong. It would stop bad actors, firstly. It would bring more capital, and that would improve products and just, continue, accelerate that cycle we have of innovation.
I think we're getting close to the end of time, so I'm going to give one more question to Elizaveta and then open it up to you all out there to maybe get one or possibly two questions from the audience. So start thinking about what you want to ask these people. Elizaveta, you must meet a lot of interesting startups and other companies in your line of work. Like, who are you coming across, or what kind of solutions are you coming across that are looking to solve the kind of technical challenges that Asim was just talking about?
Yes, but first I will do my educational speech
Okay.
a little bit, one sentence. But what is, because we hear a lot zero knowledge proof, but what is zero knowledge proof? It's basically saying that the statement is true without providing any sensitive information. So for instance, how would you prove to the authority that you're not from a section list, for instance, without putting your name or your ID number in it? So this is why here, zero knowledge proof here is an amazing use case in the KYC world. Not only, but in this one, I think it's an amazing application because regulators, I will join what you said also, say two scenarios. So if you don't have a KYC, for sure, you have your data privacy, but you have more risk to have illicit activities. It doesn't mean you will have it, but the risk is there. If you have KYC, on the other hand, they see it, okay, you don't have your data privacy, but the risk of illicit activity is reduced. So zero knowledge proof here is basically when you add it to KYC, it's the best out of the two worlds. So you have your data for yourself, and at the same time, you reduce illicit activities. So I think for that use case in the Web3 world is amazing. And for your questions in terms of example, actually, I have one person I know. It's a Swiss company, actually. It's called Albus Protocol, and they went live last month, I think. They are very good at doing this. So basically, they do the KYC for businesses while incorporating this zero knowledge proof in it. So for any DeFi protocol, for any KYC, for MiCA, for VARA regulation, I think it's one of the best solutions I've seen so far.
Awesome. I am looking around to see who's here from Proof of Talk to tell me to get off stage or not. Any questions out there in the audience? Oh, no, here you are.
No, you're fine.
We're fine for time.
Yep.
How many, well.
We have about 5-10 minutes.
Okay.
Including the Q&A.
Let's do Q&A. I think let's give people a chance. Who has a question?
Doesn't have to do with KYC, ML, any kind of general
Well,
question.
any question. I don't know. No.
And we'll keep your anonymity as well.
So I have a question.
Okay.
So with MiCA and still the question mark around anonymity, how can you find a balance if everyone has to comply with MiCA once that goes into effect? So does that rule out the opportunity to still have anonymity or no?
Well, for our current situation, that's the challenge indeed, because when we talk about anonymity in the financial industry, we talk about KYC, we talk about AML mainly. So it's very hard to find a complete anonymity while still balancing our data privacy. So that's, and it's actually going against a bit the whole purpose, the whole nature of why Bitcoin was created, why we have crypto. So I do believe that's why we have this discussion with zero knowledge proof, that it might actually have this bridge and bring the two worlds together, and hopefully it will be that way, and it will not be only a revolution for the crypto asset industry, but any other industry where you don't want necessarily to share your data, but you still want to prove something, you know what I mean? So far, we'll see how those protocols, like I mentioned, the Albus protocol will evolve, maybe some of them other will come, but I think in order to make the space for those protocols to come, regulators also need to be up to date, and that's like also the big challenge with MiCA as well, is do regulators understand the market? Do they really understand where we're going? So this is a very big question also to ask, and hopefully they're catching up. We already see it in some jurisdiction. They're already doing that. But I'm an optimistic person, so I have faith in that. So I hope with MiCA actually, by providing this legal certainty, people will say, okay, we have a regulation now, so let's actually educate people. Let's actually educate ourselves.
There are, sorry to interrupt again, but there are other ways, actually, not only zero knowledge proof. There is know your transactions, there is sovereign identity, there's decentralized identity solutions, soul-bound tokens. There's a plethora of things that are coming out every single day in this amazing ecosystem, which is the cryptocurrency / blockchain ecosystem, that we can identify even reputation of a person, even performance of a person, for example, in Web3 gaming. DeFi history, like how much loans did the person take, how much did they pay for, without even revealing their identity. And when needed, we can sign a transaction with his wallet address without saying who he is. And if needed, he can actually provide identity in the future. Even in the sign-up process also, you can do it in reverse. You provide the identity initially, never stored, but it's signed by the same wallet. So you can acknowledge with the timestamp that this person at this period of time, he did provide his identity to the platform or regulator.
Can I just add? So I think that's an interesting point, that as an investor, one thing we look at is, okay, so we've talked about how you apply KYC, but where do you apply KYC? Where's the opportunity and where does it sit best? You know, is it done in a soul-bound way where it's done in Web3? Is it done in a Web2 way? You know, I think everyone within crypto sits somewhere between the Bitcoin view where blockchain is just for transactions, it's not for compute, it's not for storage. You know, why would KYC sit there? You just need transactions. That's what ledgers are designed for. And if you look at, you know, like even Vitalik's latest post, and where Ethereum is basically trying to decentralize whatever can be decentralized, and having everything there, and possibly, you know, with soul-bound tokens, KYC sitting there. So will KYC be something that exists in the Web 2 world? Is that where, you know, from my perspective, is that where the investable opportunity is? Is that the long-term vision, or is it something that will sit long-term within Web 3? And I think that's, you know, it also is going to be determined with where regulation sits, like how much responsibility is on the KYC provider or service provider, whether that's created in a decentralized way. But I think that's also an interesting aspect, and we're looking forward to seeing how that like transpires over time.
And just to add to that, you need to try it yourself, right? Everybody here can try soul-bound tokens, can try decentralized identities. There's a lot of projects, and this is how we learn in Dubai. We learn by doing. And if you don't start using these kind of technologies, you will not know what is the value take from them. So you owe it to yourself to try, and this is the best way to educate yourself as well.
There's a guy at the back, I think, had a question. You still have a question? Yeah? And
then we switch the slides and everything. Okay, because sometimes my vision is
Yeah, so you don't want me to stay on stage as you guys are focusing everything.
you just do the
Switch
slide.
over. Not that much.
Yeah. Take Asim's mic. Jump up.
Sorry, I didn't mean to, I just wanted to make a clarification. I think it's important when talking about KYC and MiCA that MiCA doesn't implement KYC. That is from the horizontal AML regime that applies across the EU. The reason why it applies to MiCA entities is because MiCA applies to centralized entities. It enlarges the scope and turns crypto asset service providers into financial intermediaries who has to do KYC. So they all become obliged entities. So I think it's very important because you had a point in the beginning. So if you have your MetaMask account, you have a Coinbase account. If you have your Coinbase account and you want to submit to MetaMask, Coinbase has to ask you, so who are you sending to? Because that's the only thing they can do. Because clearly with MetaMask being just a software service, and they don't KYC you because they don't provide the service of custody. They don't hold your keys, you hold them yourself. So you don't have to onboard, you don't have to do KYC. But with MiCA, and then again, the overarching AML framework, Coinbase would have to ask you, so who are you sending to? And they will have to do the risk-based approach saying, is it plausible that Jan is sending 10,000 euros to his own account? Okay, we think so. Maybe I tell them, I'm actually submitting this to Elizaveta. And they will have to check, well, we can't verify that it's Elizaveta's MetaMask, but we think it's plausible. So they just have to do their checks. So I just think it's important clarification that it is the AML framework that provides the KYC. MiCA simply takes all centralized exchanges, custodians, and turns them into AML-obliged entities.
Thank you.
Good point.
Nova, do we have time for one more question, or should we wrap
We have
up?
about 2 minutes, so
There's
maybe
a
one
question
more
here,
question.
or in the black t-shirt. Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
It works? Okay.
Yeah.
I've got a question for you, Asim. You talk about soul-bound token, and I find it very interesting, but how did you do to encrypt the data you can put on the soul-bound token, because all the data are public on blockchain, so if you put the data on the soul-bound token, everybody can see it, and after the service provider need to decrypt it if you encrypt it first. So how do you do that?
Sorry, can you repeat the last part again?
The service provider like Binance, or when you want to connect with an app, need to decrypt the data on the soul-bound token if you want to keep privacy. So how do you do that? The cryptage.
That's the part where when you're talking about centralized entities working with this type of technology, it's not quite clear how it's going to work. That was my point. There's still, it's going to be interesting to see if this Web3 solution will actually function long term, or if it will need to continue to be a Web2 solution like it currently is. Particularly when you think about KYC requires storing that information, not just having access to it once, or with KYC, if you provide a service to a client, it's not just the onboarding that you do the KYC, it's got to be, you know, done at different frequencies because you need to ensure that the status of the client hasn't changed over time. So you need to have continuous access. You can't just do it now and not do it later. So these types of things, we're not quite there yet. And I think, you know, and this is where within Web3, I think everybody sits in a different place where how much of our life will be decentralized, you know, which services really need to be decentralized. Are we really decentralizing everything in the world, or, you know, is it just a Bitcoin view where it's just transactions that need to exist on a ledger? Why are we trying to compute on blockchains, store on blockchains? And then, you know, now we're trying to satisfy regulators on blockchain, right? Like, can it really happen that way? I think there's a ton of questions. There's got to be some flexibility from regulators, but I think we're still small for them. And they're asking us to compromise instead on the Web3 side. So it'll be interesting to see, but it's, I think it's an ongoing thing to see where we really converge.
There's a lot of issues that are unresolved. One thing is, for example, with soul-bound token, if you issue a credential, let's say a driver's license to somebody, can you program in expiry dates? Or what if you revoke his license, for example, if he did driving under the influence? All these mechanisms we have to look at as well. So there are challenges, but they were there with Web 2. We have a new set of challenges with Web 3 as well.
Thanks. That's brilliant. I really enjoyed that panel. Thank you very much. I'll hand back over to Nova.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you so much.